On the 20th of October, 1995, a United Airlines flight lands at JFK International, where several FBI agents are awaiting its arrival to its gate, because they have been told to arrest a rowdy first-class passenger, a classic case of high-class air rage. Except, it's not, because in his drunken stupor, this passenger has just turned first class into a bio.
Onto the catering cart. And the passengers and flight attendants look on in shock while Jerry makes history.
We start on the previous day. A busy day at Pistarini International Airport in Buenos Aires. Among the many flights, United Airlines Flight 976, a Boeing 767 bound for New York. Now, for some reason there isn't a detailed passenger manifest of this flight, which, given the circumstances, is a bit surprising. But what I can tell you is that first and business class featured a big four of important figures. Guido de Tella, Argentina's then Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mario Soares, the then 12th President of Portugal. Gerard Jerry Finneran, a Wall Street investment banker. And Dennis Manskar, pilot and husband of one of the flight attendants on board this very flight, Sharon Manskar, a veteran flight attendant of 27 years. Everyone settles down, relaxes, and prepares for takeoff, which means that for Jerry, it's time to indulge.
A little bit of the bubbly!
Jerry consumes 2 glasses of champagne. I should also tell you that he was spotted by a gate agent, drinking prior to boarding. He then gets up and sits around here, complaining that he was in a smoking section. The issue is that he was seated in a crew-reserved row, meaning he had no business being here. According to Sharon, it also appeared that Jerry's thirst wasn't exactly quenched. I was at the closet, hanging coats, and Jerry said, "I need a glass of champagne." I told him I'd be right with him. But Jerry apparently was getting desperate, and proceeded to pour himself a drink from an empty bottle. Seeing that the man was clearly losing control, Sharon locked up a champagne bottle that Jerry possessed, telling him, "This is not for you, we have to take off now." As the plane climbs out of Buenos Aires and cruises its way to New York, everything seems to be normal. Passengers relax, babies create some background noise, and Jerry is being served his wine. Or, in his eyes, not enough wine. Because at some point during the flight, Jerry began to pour himself some more drink. When a flight attendant requested him to stop, Jerry instead took the bottle back to his seat and tucked it between his legs. At this point, the flight attendants agreed that it would be best for Jerry to be cut off from drink service. However, when they told Jerry this, he was enraged, demanding any flight attendant in sight to serve him more drinks. When approaching a male flight attendant, he demanded him as well, and when he was met with a stern no, Jerry was heard saying, "I want your name, I'm going to bust your ass." Meanwhile, another flight attendant received a notification that a passenger on board was feeling ill. He goes up to the cockpit, grabs a first aid kit, and makes his way to the passenger. Except, he doesn't, because a wild Jerry appears. Jerry immediately hassles the poor flight attendant, demanding more drinks, whilst the ill passenger, becomes more ill. It's unclear what happens to this sick passenger, but what we do know is that Jerry has just delayed a passenger's treatment. Somehow, things begin to appear normal. Meal service is now finished, most of the passengers at this point are asleep, and curtains are being drawn. Sharon Manskar is looking to unwind after a very eventful start to this flight, when suddenly, she feels her seat shaking. She gets up and is immediately shoved through the curtains by who else? Jerry. Getting back up, Sharon notices that Jerry, drunk out of his mind and clearly out of control, rummaging through the contents of the first-class galley. You can probably guess what he's trying to find. He then grabs a drinks cart, gets on top of it, opens up several bottles before proceeding to douse himself in booze, and then... Jerry, still on the cart, drops his pants, drops his underwear, and proceeds to deliver the ass-blowing of a lifetime. Ever the gentleman, Jerry uses some nearby linen napkins to wipe himself. He then gets off the cart, and with his pants still down and ass still brown, proceeds to track excrement all over the first and business classes. There was human excrement everywhere, said Matskar. On the walls, on the linen napkins, on the walls of first one lavatory and then the other. Accounts also state that Jerry, unsurprisingly, was also complaining that he wasn't getting any drinks. He was doing this whilst carrying excrement in his hands, smearing feces on literally anything and everything that he could smear. When his smear campaign was finally over, Jerry went to the nearest lavatory he could find and locked himself in it. Well, shit. Now what? This might come as a shock, but mid-flight alcohol-induced explosive diarrhea, spread upon surfaces as if it were chocolate frosting, is not only gross, but it's a legitimate biohazard that warrants preparation for an immediate emergency landing. And that's exactly what happens. The pilots are notified about what has happened behind them and immediately begins emergency procedures. Based on their current position, San Juan appears to be the closest place to land, so the pilots prepare to divert to Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport. Except, they're never going to land there, and there's an actual reason behind this. Or, to be more specific, two reasons. Guido de Tella and Mario Suarez. De Tella, and more specifically Suarez, are not only highly important figures with their very own security details, but Suarez is an actual head of state, which means that if the plane did indeed divert to San Juan, it would be a massive security risk, emergency or not. If Jerry's shit suddenly caused a structural malfunction, then things might have been different. But for now, controllers give Flight 976 a firm no. And thus, the plane continues its trek to JFK, which by now is some 4 hours away. In the meantime, the rest of the crew try to make do with the massive amounts of poo. Jerry is still inside the lavatory, so in the meantime, the best thing that the crew could do is cancel the rest of the scheduled food service, stay up for the rest of the flight in fear of Jerry doing something even more monstrous, and attempt to mask the smell as best as possible. According to reports, the masking tool of choice, copious amounts of Karl Lagerfeld perfume spread throughout the aisles of the plane. Keywords, the plane, not just first and business class, which means that by now, some people over in economy might have seen, heard, or are smelling Jerry's little dilemma. And speaking of which, Jerry is still inside the lav, smelling like shit, feeling like shit, the lavatory being his very own sanctuary of shit. Except, it won't be, at least not for long. Meet Susan Bergen, Jerry's work colleague, flight companion, and now one of several people tasked with getting Jerry out of the stall, which they eventually do through a combination of lock manipulation and Susan's pleading voice. Jerry gets out of the lavatory, where Susan takes his very filthy hand and helps him go back to his seat, where Susan puts her head on his smelly shoulders, and they end up going to sleep. The stench so overwhelming that the flight attendants threw a blanket over them. How adorable. Fast forward 4 hours and Flight 976 lands at JFK. Waiting for them, however, are several members of the Port Authority, and of course, the FBI, who unsurprisingly arrest Jerry and charge him with the following: interference with a flight crew, intimidating a flight attendant, and assaulting a flight attendant. That also means that it's time to meet Jerry's lawyer, one Charles Stillman, who, in response to the New York Daily News, said, "I promise you, you have no idea what hell will come to you if you print these lies." Days after the events, Jerry is on trial, facing the consequences of his disturbing, disgusting, revolting actions.
That is a disgusting act by
Jerry Finneran.
Just kidding. He's not. Because, as it turns out, Jerry pled not guilty to all of the above charges, and then posted a $100,000 bond. Until he doesn't. 10 days later, Jerry's bail is amended by federal prosecutors and granted by one Joan Azrak, a then federal magistrate judge. This also meant that he was required to attend an alcohol counseling program and to not fly anywhere without the advanced permission of the court. Meanwhile, the story of a rich, middle-aged drunk man spewing obscenities and spraying crap inside an airplane has started to spread like wildfire. David Letterman even does his patented Top 10 segment based on these events. The Top 10 Gerard Finneran Excuses. You try drinking for 14 hours and see if you can tell the difference between a food cart and a bathroom. His ass wouldn't fit in the overhead compartment. And the number one excuse? Well, like you've never done it. In February 1996, Jerry finally pleads guilty in relation to the events of Flight 976. The charge this time, threatening a flight attendant. Despite good old Charlie's constant attempts to maintain Jerry's character, calling him a marvelously decent human being, a highly seasoned traveler with no problems whatsoever, the judge wasn't buying it. During trial, Jerry admitted that he had no intention of carrying out his threat, but badly wanted another glass of wine. You know, despite wine service being stopped. In his own words, I was angry. Facing a potential 6 months in jail, Jerry instead was sentenced to 2 years probation and a $5,000 fine, on top of the other things that Jerry previously agreed to handle. Repaying United $1,000 for cleaning costs, repaying every single passenger on 976 for ticket costs, and serving 300 hours of community service. In the years after the incident, Jerry ended up volunteering at South 40, a not-for-profit organization that helped convicts find employment and housing after their release. Jerry would ultimately pass away in 2004 due to complications from Alzheimer's. Notably, his New York Times obituary didn't mention his involvement on 976. But at least you now know the story of how one man's rage can turn into a big-ass problem. The worst case of air rage that you have now heard of.
Rather father.